for you. How do you know you have the condition? What lifestyle changes do you need to do to lower your high blood pressure? Dr. Stephen Obiero, Adabongo medical officer, is right here with us to be answering those particular questions and others that you need to be answered. 0795 045 864 is the number to call in live. He'll be filling, you can fill all those questions. He'll be answering them and just giving you tips on what you need to know about high blood pressure. You probably know someone who has high blood pressure, or they really talk about it, and this is the opportune time for you to have all that. Dr. Karibusani, you can give us your intro. Who is Dr. Stephen Obiero before we get to this conversation?
Okay, thank you so much. For my listeners, my name is Dr. Stephen Obiero. I'm a medical officer. I'm specializing in cardiology, internal medicine. I'm also the president of the Western Medical Association, and I'm one of the the leaders of the Young Doctors Network, Kenya Medical Association.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Now for this conversation, because it is a curtain raiser until Friday that we're going to be back in World Hypertension Day, and a lot is going to be said even by different NGOs, by governments. Will be taking a look at what you personally expect. But before all that, we always throw in all that, high blood pressure, hypertension around, but we don't really understand it. Help us understand what even hypertension means. How is it diagnosed? What does it really mean?
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so basically hypertension, from the word hyper, it means that it's blood pressure that is elevated. Yes, tension has something to do with pressure. So the blood pressure is beyond the normal. And when you talk about the normal, cutoff is usually 140, the upper limit, and then the lower limit is 90. So it's usually 142 to 90. And usually it's measured in millimeters of mercury. So hypertension normally says that when that blood pressure is elevated, and normally it's not just blood pressure being elevated, but it has to follow some criteria. Yeah, so like for example, you have to make sure that you have had maybe 2 readings, and those 2 readings have to be 2 minutes apart, and at least you should have rested before the doctor or the nurse measures your pressures, at least for 5 minutes. So anything that is not following that criteria, even if your blood pressure will be above 140, it doesn't meet the criteria of being high blood pressure.
So for 5 minutes straight, because now even as you continue explaining to us these particular readings, and normally you just throw the whole 140/90 readings. So help us understand this for someone who's watching this morning, and they've had that medical professional telling them you should be, if it's, so is it if you have below or rather above 140/90 for both the readings for 140 and also for the 90, and you can also tell us what does the 140 mean as well as the 90?
Okay, I think I can start with the last part. That 140 means there is the pressure. The first pressure is usually called the systolic pressure, and this is usually the pressure when your heart is pushing blood, when the heart pumps. So that time when the heart pumps, the pressure that will be recorded will be the systolic pressure, and it's the one usually slightly up on the upper limit. So it's called systolic. And then the lower one is usually called diastolic pressure. Diastolic means is that time when the heart is filling with blood. So the heart usually has 2 parts. This blood has to come from other parts of the body, fill the heart, and then now the heart has to pump it to other parts of the body. So that time when the machine picks up the pressures, when your heart is filling, it's called the diastolic pressure, when the heart is resting. And then the systolic pressure is when now the heart is pumping. And this is very important because now the diastolic pressure mostly records, tries to look at how stiff are the vessels. And the systolic pressure mostly records how hard or how heavy or is the heart trying to contract. Yes, and normally this 140 and 90, normally how we reach at it is that You take the blood pressure of the general population, and you look at the curve. Then you look at the middle numbers.
Okay.
So it's not just something that has been taken from us. Just they take from several people, just a random trial of people. Yeah, and we have, according to American Heart Association classification, we usually have these classifications of pressures, so that there are some people, like if someone who has 140 and 90 and has some conditions like diabetes, you don't need, like for diabetes, you might not need that 140, 90, you might be lower. Yes, but I think we'll come to that.
Yeah.
So normally below the perfect pressure is usually 120 over 80.
Oh, all right.
So it has to that should be the normal pressure. I do the normal pressures of the heart, the blood pressures. So that less than 120 and 80 is the normal, and then 120 to 130 and 80 to 90 or 80 to 89 is usually called high normal. And then there is now the pre-hypertension, which is 130 to 139. And then we have 90 to 99, that is pre-hypertension. So that is important, because now people are classified there. When you record your pressures and like that, we know how we're going to intervene in terms of lifestyle modification, if you have to bring in interventions like pharmacological now, drugs and all that. So, but the important thing is usually to have that pre-hypertension and high normal comes in when now we are talking about management of hypertension. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So someone listening to you this morning, and they're asking, so are they at a risk? When they take a look at how they live and all that, they're asking, are they at a risk to have a higher blood pressure? Who is really susceptible to be at this kind of stage and have this condition?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, so the risk factor in terms of hypertension, normally we look at it in two ways. We classify them into two. We have that hypertension which you cannot get the cause. It's called primary hypertension. And then we have the secondary hypertension, where you can be able to identify the immediate cause. So most of these risk factors that we talk about, they are for primary hypertension, and then now we have those secondary causes, which are the risk factor, but also the causative agents of the hypertension. So generally, when you talk about the important, there are so many risk factors, but the important risk factors are things like alcohol consumption, things like smoking, stress, very, very important risk factors. And then now we have family history. For example, now you have a family member who has hypertension, who had hypertension or something like that. You're also at risk. It's usually sometimes transmitted through the genes. Yeah, and then now we have these other risk factors which are directly causing hypertension. Like now these things like smoking, they are not directly contributors of hypertension, but they can bring out, if you have the susceptibility, it can bring out that hypertension. So now when you talk about now the secondary hypertensions, these are now the causes of hypertension, which are also risk factor, but now you can directly attribute to them. And things like there are things like chronic diseases, kidney diseases, things like diabetes mellitus, which is a very, very common cause. Like you find that majority of our population, people who have diabetes, they're also likely to have hypertension.
Okay.
And if they have hypertension, most likely the immediate thing normally is usually heart failure.
Right.
So these are things that are usually very close. And then you have now other things like drug-induced, things like cocaine and some painkillers, like the NSAIDs, Brufen and such stuffs.
Right.
Yeah.
When you take a look, because one of the risk factors as well is also someone's weight. Tell us, how does that factor in when you take a look at someone's weight vis-a-vis the high blood pressure? Because I mean, medics would really tell us, do a lot of physical activity and lose weight as well. So how does that, how is that related because when you tell someone and they take a look at how much they weigh, so the big question would be, so how much should I be weighing so that it's not going to make me have a high blood pressure?
Thank you for that. That's a very, very good question, by the way. And when you look at actually hypertension and obesity, or maybe let's say dyslipidemia, because you look at it in two ways. You might not be overweight, but you have bad lipids in your body, which can directly make you have hypertension. So I think we'll start with the first one now, the obesity.
Okay.
So normally, the criteria, the cutoff normally is we look at something called the body mass index. It's called the BMI.
The BMI,
Yeah. So the BMI has a way of classifying people into the risk of hypertension and even other things. I think this is a very wide topic that we can cover in a whole day. But I think more importantly, it's just to look at it in a nutshell, that obesity is directly equal to, is proportional to hypertension. And they normally say when you cut off your weight by even 5%, you are likely to reduce your pressures, especially the systolic pressures, by about even 10 millimeters. That's very, very important. So normally, weight control has a direct contribution to reduction of pressures and management of hypertension, if you have any. So in terms of the BMI, we usually say that you have those small cutoffs. Normally, we say someone has to be above between 18 to 24. That's the normal. That should be the normal.
The BMI.
The BMI.
Okay.
Because the BMI normally they calculate the height versus the weight versus the height squared. So that one now, if you are less than 18, that one you are underweight. Then between 18 to 24.5 or 24.9, that one is normal. Now above 24.9 to nini, you are overweight. 24.9 to about 29.9. So now you're above 30, now that's now you are obese.
Okay.
Yes.
So above 30, there are high chances of you having high blood pressure.
Yes, so normally overweight is not really bad, but once you are above 30, then you are likely to get hypertension.
And even as you continue trying to analyze the whole, the BMI, the relation between someone's weight versus them having high blood pressure, you take a look at someone, for example, who regularly goes to the gym. A good example, the bodybuilders. For them, so help us understand now that bit, because this person regularly does physical activity, but then they're adding mass. So you probably have someone weighing 100 kg plus vis-a-vis, let's say, the height. So could they be having a higher BMI that is probably 30 plus? Because they have a lot of mass compared to the fat.
Okay, I think that's okay. That's a very, very good question. But I was just about to finish about the issue of the obesity.
Yes, please. Before.
Yeah. So because that's a very, very important question. So when you look at the issue of the BMI, we have that issue of the BMI, and then you have a very, very important thing that our listeners also need to understand. There's this thing called the waist circumference, the hip waist circumference. So that is usually very, very important also. If you are not able to, because BMI sometimes can give erroneous results, because you can get someone who is short. The person is short, but he's not that fat. So because now you see that one, someone can be very, very huge, but he's very tall. Now he'll have a smaller BMI, because BMI now usually take weight, you divide by the height squared. So if you are tall, you are likely to have a lower BMI, but still you have issues, just as you addressed. When you look at the bodybuilders, you might find someone who is very well built, but he's tall. But now when you look, he has risk factors. He's probably not obese according to the BMI, but he's at risk of getting hypertension. So some of the other things that we look at are the hip, the waist circumference. So normally we say that for a woman it's supposed to be less than 88 centimeters. 88 centimeters, and then for a man it's supposed to be not more than 102. So those are some of the things that we look at. Yes, centimeter squared, waist circumference.
Okay.
Yes. So that is something that we usually look vis-a-vis the BMI. Because if you realize that BMI is not giving you a very good result, then you can look at the waist circumference. So for these bodybuilders, what happens is that they might be having other comorbid conditions.
Okay.
And when I mean comorbid conditions, it means that they might be having other issues. They might be having some maybe genetic predisposition to hypertension.
Right.
Or maybe, because now you see someone who is bodybuilding, it means that the heart has to also enlarge. You see, when you exercise, your muscles expand. So the same usually happens for the heart. If the heart struggles to pump, normally it grows bigger. And when it grows bigger, it's growing bigger because now the workload is more.
It's more, yeah.
Yes.
Is that relative as well to, let's say, marathoners, people who really engage the cardiovascular quite intensely?
Exactly, exactly. And that's why you find some of these extreme sport guys and all that. Sometimes you normally find them maybe just dying of sudden death or something like that, because what happens is that they're used to exercising a lot. So the heart is used to really being overworked. So if it becomes overworked like that, it dilates, it becomes bigger, it's hypertrophy. And then when it becomes bigger like that, normally it takes up the space of its own blood supply. That's why when you find that now some parts of the heart now starts dying off, and now you have started having issues, maybe you might be having silent MIs and something like that. So normally these bodybuilders, you're not supposed to be so much of a bodybuilder to the extent that now you are doing it at the expense of your heart, because your heart will always try to make sure that it's pumping blood to all of the part of your body. However much you exercise, the more you exercise, the more the heart has to make sure that it's pumping. And the more the heart grows bigger. And when the heart grows bigger, that's very dangerous. Because now, when the heart grows bigger, it's a condition called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy.
Interesting.
So this hypertrophic cardiomyopathy now, normally it affects you because now it constricts the blood supply of its own blood supply. So when it constricts its own blood supply, it means that there are some areas of that heart that will not be able to be adequately perfused. And then now that becomes now a very big problem.
Right.
You find like people like maybe Kipchoge, normally most likely maybe they have a dilated heart because they have been used to running, they have been used to doing so many races, and then their heart has been used to, it's like a treadmill. And the muscle of the heart will always, it's usually good at responding to that, it will dilate.
Right.
Yes.
So the fact that I was bringing that up is because when you take a look at the lifestyle of this kind of a person, someone who regularly does this physical activity, they won't have symptoms. And the World Health Organization tells us that you may not actually know that you have symptoms of hypertension until you really go and get checked and have the whole, readings, uangalie, uone, uko sawa. So why is that, the case? As WHO tells us, you can't really know your symptoms until you go and get checked.
Exactly. So I think in my opening remarks, I should have said that hypertension is a silent killer. That is something that my listeners should take home, even you as my friend.
Yeah.
Should take home that message, that hypertension is a silent killer. And this is the case. When your blood pressure goes up, it's going up because of something. That's one. And when it goes up, the body will try to compensate for that. So you might not be able to notice. Like for you, you will continue the activities and all that, but hey, your heart is the one who's trying to balance things out. So for example, look at hypertension itself. Huh? Now the pressures are going up, maybe because you have had a stress factor, maybe a constant stress. Because normally what happens to, like for example, when you are stressed, normally the stress hormones will go up. And when the stress hormones goes up, those stress hormones, what usually they do, they try to constrict the vessels. Now when they constrict the vessels, it means that the space for blood to go through and go to tissues and take oxygen there, bring back carbon dioxide, now becomes smaller. So the heart has to squeeze. It's like you're trying to squeeze out blood through a very small space. So it means that these blood vessels will be tensed up. So, and that is the pressure now that you're talking about. So once you are stressed up constantly, your hormones constantly are up, they'll try to do such things. They'll try to constrict vessels, and then they'll also increase your heart rate. Because now, hypertension, normally we look at pressure as the function of how much blood is pumping and the rate at which the heart is pumping. So when your heart is pumping so fast, and also it's pumping a lot of volume, then your pressures will be obviously be very high. So that's normally what the hormones usually try to do.
So at this point, there is no visible or any kind of feeling that you have in your body that some of those your body is just giving you some red flags.
The red
this
flags,
is probably happening because as you're telling us, it's a silent killer. There are no symptoms really until you get sick. Until you start having headaches and all that. So until rather even before then, the body doesn't give you any signs.
Yeah, so the body is not giving you signs at this point. It's just trying to compensate. So when the body fails to compensate, that's when symptoms start coming. And most of the time, when symptoms start coming, you're already having complications of hypertension. Yeah, because now when you start having complications of hypertension, it means that, for example, now your body is trying to pump to your brain. It's really struggling. So the brain, there are some parts of the brain that usually will detect such things like headache and all that. So you'll find that they are being stretched and they are being tensed. So once they are being tensed like that, now you start feeling things like headache and such things. And you see when you are going there, then your risk factor for getting maybe a complication like stroke increases. Things like maybe getting now a serious heart failure also goes up. The important things like maybe also getting a kidney failure, because now your kidney fails, it means now you are not able to clear out your toxins and all that in your body. And therefore, when that happens, it means now you now start getting symptoms. And when your hormones have tried to help the heart to squeeze this blood through the vessels and is not able to do that. Okay. Now this hormone starts giving you the side effects. You start getting the headaches, the fatigability, and sweating and all those things. But initially you'll be very okay.
Right.
Yeah. Normally maybe you get to those complications when the pressure goes above maybe 160 or 180.
Right.
Yes.
So even as you continue, there's a number below your screens right there. In case you're watching us from home or wherever you're watching us from, remember I told you that we'll be having this, we'll be commemorating World Hypertension Day this coming Friday. So before then, there's going to be a lot of conversation this entire week on what the government really wants to do, what different NGOs are doing. But then you personally, you probably have hypertension condition, you know it, you know someone who has it. So the number there is just for you to call in live. Dr. Stephen Obiero, right here, medical officer, will be answering all your questions, all those probably things that you've heard around the streets and you really want to clarify them. 0795 045 864 is the number to call us live, 22047. And I'm being told that we do have Lilian kutoka Naivasha. Lilian, habari asubuhi. Lilian, habari asubuhi. Lilian, habari asubuhi kutoka Naivasha. Okay, ni kama Lilian sijui amepotea kidogo, but then call us live, and when you're calling us live, mute your TV or just have it off. Tell us where you're calling us from, tell us your name, be as audible as possible. Tumia English ama Kiswahili ama ile lugha yenye iko comfortable na wewe. Okay, naambiwa Lilian amerudi. Lilian, habari asubuhi.
Hello.
Habari asubuhi.
Hello.
Hello, tunakusikia. Habari asubuhi kutoka Naivasha.
Hello.
Hello, Lilian, tunakusikia, endelea. Lilian, kama unanipata, endelea.
Nilikuwa
yes, endelea, ha?
Niko mzima.
Yes, tuambie.
Hello.
Yes, tunakusikia Lilian, endelea.
Hello.
Lilian, tunakupata, tuzungumza nasi. All right, we probably have Lilian a little late.
Viangu nimemute.
Yes, umemute. Asante sana.
Hello.
Yes, tunakusikia Lilian, endelea kuongea na sisi.
Hello.
Lilian, kama unatupata, ask your question.
Swali moja.
Yes.
You talk a lot about the high blood pressure. But little is said about the low. Can something be explained on the low blood pressure, please?
Sawa. Asante sana Lilian kutoka Naivasha. 0795-045-864 is the number to call us live. Remember, when you're calling us live, mute your TV, have it off, tell us where you're calling us from and your name, and be as audible as possible. Uliza hizo maswali zote. Dr. Stephen Obiero, a medical officer, will be answering all that. An interesting bit she raises here. So as much as tunaongelea the whole high blood pressure, yes, but yangependa kujua story of low blood pressure. And before we also take a look at some graphics form of this conversation, but before that, low blood pressure. Could you answer, Lilian?
Asante sana Lilian kwa hilo swali. So I think it's a good question. Na hii mambo ya low blood pressure, normally we don't talk much about it because it doesn't really come into the picture unless now we are talking about patients who are hypertensive and they are on medication. Now maybe they have taken an overdose, or maybe the medications are working more efficiently than we expected.
Right.
So for low blood pressure, normally we say blood pressure which is less than 90/60.
Okay. Kulai, because there's a caller right now.
Yes.
Stephen kutoka Muranga. Hold that thought, you could probably just wrap it up and answer Lilian. But then Stephen, habari asubuhi kutoka Muranga. Stephen, habari asubuhi.
Hello.
Yes, tuongee na sisi.
Nilikuwa nauliza swali. Hello.
Yes, endelea. Okay, we'll probably have Stephen a little bit later on. When you call us live, just mute your TV so that I'll have a seamless conversation with you and answer all those questions. Probably try to have Stephen a little bit later on. But then, kumalizia on what you're telling us about the low blood pressure.
Yeah. So kwa low blood pressure, we had said that it's a blood pressure which is less than 90, which is the upper one, and then lower, and then also less than 60. So 90/60. It should not be less than 90/60. Okay. Less than that, it's called hypertension or low blood pressure. And normally, most of the time, it comes into the picture for those patients who are on medication, who have been managed for hypertension, and now they are on medication. Probably unapatanga most of the time these are the people mwenye amesahau dawa akamiss dose, alafu sasa akasema acha nimeze mbi. Nimeze mbi. And maybe I hope we'll probably talk about that part of management, misconception, and how maybe you are a hypertensive patient, how you're supposed to go about everything and all that. And also very important maybe for those patients who are also diabetic, because most of the diabetic patients are also hypertensive. So those are now the patients we are very watchful, hatutaki waende low blood pressure. Other causes of low blood pressure is when maybe someone has, maybe una bleed, kitu kama, or you are losing blood, or you have other conditions, like maybe you are in shock, maybe you took a drug which you are reacting to. So that one can easily cause you to have low blood pressure. But now, it will now become one of the symptoms of so many other symptoms that what will have maybe manifested in terms of kama umechukua maybe a toxin, or you have ingested something or something like that. So normally it doesn't really something that we talk about, but it comes to the picture for those patients who are already hypertensive.
And because you see, we don't really talk about it, and just to digress a little bit, because Lilian brought it up, is there a possibility that now from the low blood pressure, because you're really trying to maintain it, is there a possibility that you go from low to high? And how can that really happen?
Yeah, you can easily switch from low to high. You can go from high to low. It all, but especially now this normally doesn't happen to normal people, especially now people who have been they have not been having high pressures before. They have not been on any medication. It doesn't really come into picture. But now it becomes an issue for these patients now whom we are managing for hypertension, or we are managing for other conditions like chronic kidney disease or diabetic mellitus, very common conditions, whereby now we are really fighting. We are trying to go up, we are trying to come back. So it's because normally it comes into the picture maybe your selection of drugs, especially now when you talk about the hypertensives now. Our selection of drugs are not that good, or maybe the patient is not taking medications at the same time Like for example, when you decide you'll be taking these medications in the morning, at 8 a.m. you have to take them at 8 a.m. every day.
Right.
So if you keep fluctuating now, that's when now you start having a fluctuation of pressures up and low.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Let's take a look at some data here by Kenya Demographic Health Survey. They released this report last year. I believe it's a report, a 2022 report, a whole survey they did. So early on, you're telling us that hypertension, according to you, and actually even according to World Health Organization, is a silent killer. But then by this data that we can now take a look at, the infographics on the same, which really shows that it could also be a rich man's problem. So I'd really love your take on that. So on our infographics shows about the hypertension prevalence among women from poor households is about 5%. The hypertension prevalence among women from the rich households is 11%. So this is for women. So women in poor households, 5%, but then from the rich households, about 11%. Now let's get now for the men. So it says hypertension prevalence among men from poor households is 2%. So that's in Kenya. And the prevalence among men from the rich households is more than double that. So that's about 5%. For the men. When you take a look at now variations in different counties, for women, Kirinyaga leads with 20% prevalence for women, is followed by Taita Taveta 18% and Laikipia 16%. Later on, I'd like you to tell us how each county and why we're having these counties leading. That's for women in the different counties. For the men, Embu is leading, followed by Homa Bay. The prevalence on hypertension. But I'd love us to start with, even before we get to the counties, we begin with, is this a rich man's condition? Even, when you take a look at the lifestyle, because this particular survey really tends to show that the prevalence really, is more dominant in rich households.
Very correct. Yeah, so that's a very, very good question and an observation from the study. Very interesting, by the way, because when you look at WHO or when you look at some of the studies that have been done worldwide, it actually shows the opposite. That that hypertension is commoner in low-income areas. And it's less
low and middle income.
Yes, because the prevalence of hypertension in the latest guideline that I looked at, the latest studies, shows that the prevalence is at around 31%. 31%. And now it is 29% in high-income areas or countries, and just slightly above 31% in low-income areas. So that's quite a bit confusing. But I think it also boils down to other issues. There's this issue of...
Kindly, could I interrupt you a bit?
Yes.
As we pick this call? Yes. That whole bit of this infographics, yes. we'll dive into that a little bit later. Yeah. Let's hear from Margaret kutoka hapa Nairobi. Maggie, habari asubuhi?
Mzuri sana, labda yako.
Yangu huku studio iko salama. Tafadhali punguza volume ya TV tafadhali kidogo tu, alafu tuongeleshe.
Niko 70 years. For the last 3 months, I have been measuring my blood pressure. It is 145 or 130.
45 or okay.
145 through 83, and 130 to 72. Is it okay? Can you ask the doctor whether that is okay or not?
So could you kindly unaweza rudia hiyo ndio pia apate vizuri. Umesema 145 over 83.
Yeah, 83 na saa ingine inakuja 138 or 72.
130 80. Okay, sawa.
Yeah.
So thank you very much Margaret kutoka hapa tu Nairobi. Salimia watu wa pali huko. You can probably answer her, then we continue.
Okay, that's a good one. Thank you, Margaret. Yeah, so I hope, Margaret, you are following that we talked about 140/90, but then she's also talked about the age, 70 years old. That's very important Because when you look at hypertension, we are also looking at, we classify it in terms of also the age. And normally, we usually have old age for so many things. Like now, when you talk about hypertension and old age, normally consider old age as above 80. We consider old age as above 80.
Oh, so 80 years old.
Yes, so someone who is above 80, for blood pressure, we normally we say hypertension will be 150 over.
Oh, it changes now.
Yes, it now changes.
Okay.
It will be 150 over 90 or 95. So that's now, if it's above 150, 95, that's when now we'll say the patient is having hypertension. That is someone who is above 80 years. So for them, it will not be like the 140, 90. That's the first thing to note. But now I've noted from her readings, one of the systolic is talked about 145 or 140.
Yeah, she mentioned 145 over, I believe, 83. She also mentioned the terms would probably be 130 over 72.
Yeah, so the diastolic, the lower ones, they have no problem, but this one is a bit slightly high. So I think I'll advise her, she might not really be having the hypertension because, as we said in our opening remarks, is that you have to make sure that you take 2 readings. And those 2 readings have to be taken at least 2 minutes apart. And you should have at least rested for 5 minutes. So when you come to see the doctor, maybe you've been maybe umekuwa unatembea, you've been doing other activities, maybe you are from taking coffee, things like that can change the pressures. So you have to sit down. You have to sit down first, relax for 5 minutes. And actually, if you have smoked, or maybe you have taken caffeine, it has to be at least 30 minutes before you take the pressures. So anything that is in between that window, you might not find, it will find it will affect your readings, and maybe someone will start diagnosing you with hypertension, we don't have it, and the patient, now someone puts on medication, and now those are the people now will come with low blood pressure again to our facility later, because now you are treating hypertension for someone who has normal pressure.
So it alters it all the way.
Yeah, now it brings it down. So the issue we are talking about hypertension. Yeah, so for her, I'll advise she goes to a facility, make sure that maybe she has not smoked or maybe taken caffeine for the last 30 minutes, go there, sit down for 30 minutes, and then they have 2 readings. And it has to be taken by a very good cuff. Normally, sometimes we find that they'll just take the machine with a cuff, which is not a good size for that, for that age or for the arm. Because you have to look at the cuff circumference. It has to be very appropriate. Ndio ishike mkono vizuri, so that it can feel the tension of the blood vessels. Yeah, so it's usually a lot of things. So you are not supposed to just diagnose someone with hypertension. You have to just sit down, you measure the fasting for 145, 95, wewe anza dawa. It doesn't work like that. So those when you take those steps or those precautions before taking hypertension, now you'll get correct reading, and then from there, now you'll see a physician and then he'll advise you accordingly. If you have to start lifestyle modifications, kama tunakuambia sasa punguza chumvi, vitu kama hizo, at least you know you have pressures.
You'd mentioned it should be twice. So if hosi, so the first time, and then after 2 minutes, the second time.
Yeah, you have to take 2 readings, and those 2 readings has to be 2 minutes apart.
2 minutes apart.
But before you take even the first reading, you should have rested for at least 2 minutes. So it's a rule of 2.
Okay.
Yes.
So let's hear from Steven. Steven, habari asubuhi. Steven, habari asubuhi kutoka yes, wewe kutoka Muranga. Ongea na sisi.
Okay. Mimi swali nilikuwa nauliza. Mimi niko na miaka 57.
57?
Mimi niko na miaka 57. Mzuri sana.
Yes,
mimi niko na miaka 57.
Okay.
Na pressure yangu inakuwa 120 over 8 or 25. 57 years.
Okay.
Mimi nilikuwa nauliza kama hiyo pressure ni mbaya 120 over 9, sababu naona hapo wakiongea mambo ya miaka. Sasa yangu inakuja 120, 119 over 75 over 80. Swali langu kwanza, hiyo pressure ni mbaya? Nilikuwa na hiyo, na mimi natumianga dawa moja asubuhi.
So ndio daktari pia kusaidia, unaweza rudia hizo readings tafadhali, alafu maybe utuambie ni medication ya aina gani unatumia. Kwa readings ni gani?
Mimi natumia Ibarat moja na HTZ ya 25 mg. Na weight yangu yenyewe inakujanga between 90 100, lakini mimi nakuanga mfupi. kama kuna shida yoyote na hiyo pressure. Tena mimi sikunywa pombe. Sifuti sigara. Na angalianga mimi zangu kidogo ili nisiharibu hiyo kitu. Na mimi sio diabetic.
Okay.
Sasa nilikuwa naulizia kama hiyo pressure iko shida ama iko sawa. 119 ni 120 over 8 over 75 ama sababu ya miaka. Hiyo ndio swali langu.
Okay, sawa. Asante sana Steven kutoka Murang'a. Salimia watu wa Murang'a pahali huko. Your namesake is curious. 120 over 75 being at around 57 years. I think he told us he weighs between 90 to 100 kg. Give him some tips.
Yeah, so I think kitu nitasema ya kwanza ni kwamba hiyo pressure yake iko sawa. Kama amekuwa na wasiwasi atulie. That's good pressure. In fact, hizo dawa naona zinafanya kazi. Yes.
Right.
So kwa sababu tumeongelea mambo ya 80 years lakini yeye amesema kwa 57.
Yeah.
Na tukisema 140 over 90 hatumaanishi lazima ikuwe hapo. Tunasema less. Hata nilikuwa niona nimeclassify. Tukaanza na less than 120, less than 80 is the perfect normal. And then now we have 120 to 129. 80 to 89, that's the high normal. And then we have pre-hypertension, which is 130 to 139. Then we also have 90 to 99, that is pre-hypertension. So, 80 to 89, that is pre-hypertension. So, anyone who is around 120, 130 on antihypertensives, on pressure, that's good pressures.
That's good. Okay.
I think that's really good.
So, really good. So because I think a number of callers would be asking, they really want to know the specific readings for them, and I'm pretty sure even for this one, Eugene kutoka Kakamega. But okay, ni kama imekatika. So I was saying, I think a number of people would really, they've had the readings before, and they had a couple. Eugene kutoka Kakamega, habari asubuhi. Do we still have Eugene? Oh, no, we don't have Eugene. Okay, so I was saying a number of people have previously had the readings, and they probably saw somewhere, maybe inaweza kuwa too high, or they really just want to clarify. So to clarify for them, what numbers should they be seeing so that they start seeing, hey, by the way, hii inaweza kuwa too high? As much as you're telling us 140 over 90. So if, for example, someone sees 150 over, let's say, 100, is that now a red flag that they should?
Okay. Now, just before maybe I answer that question, just quickly for Steve, I would say the only thing maybe anafaa kufanya maybe ni just weight reduction.
Okay.
So amesema ako 92, 100, something I noted. So I think for him, it's just to try to manage the weight, at least akuje afike weight yenye ni mzuri. Kwa sababu nao pia amesema ni mfupi. So definitely.
Your weight ni mzuri ni gani?
You see,
if, for example, you weigh 90 kg, taking a look at his lifestyle, no alcohol and all that, what's the
an ideal man? Yeah. An ideal man is a 70 kg man.
Okay.
That's an ideal man. Yeah. But now also we have to look at the issue of the height.
The height and the weight and okay. Yeah.
So the fact that she anasema ni mfupi na ako 90 to 100, now that means most likely BMI is inachapa huko 30s. So maybe just try to do weight reduction. Ajaribu ku diet ikuwe mzuri. There's something called DASH diet. I think maybe we can come to that later. A diet which is low in the salt, high potassium, bananas and all these things inaweza msaidia sana kuna vegetables.
Right.
Yes.
So before the callers will take a look at something that I'd really want us to break down. And you're telling us that according to WHO, we always see it saying that the prevalence is mostly in low and middle income countries and populations. But then according to the Kenya Demographic and Health Survey, the report they released last year showing prevalence among men and women from rich households is particularly high than those from poor. So is it that the dynamics are changing and lifestyles are changing so that someone who is in a poor household doesn't really have to worry about all that? Right, I'm being told we have another caller. I hope we really get to tackle all that. But Jeremy, right? Jeremy kutoka Eldoret. Jeremy kutoka Eldoret, habari asubuhi.
Salama sana.
I hope mko salama. Yes, uko na swali au maoni?
Niko na swali. Imekuwa muda kidogo. Nilipoteza mama yangu karibu wiki 2 imepita.
Pole sana.
Na alikuwa na pressure.
Okay.
Na alikuwa diabetic pia. Lakini wakati tulipeleka hospitali, nikaambiwa yeye daktari akasema pressure yake ni unrecordable.
Unrecordable?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sasa nikashindwa sasa ni nini anamaanisha. Akasema they are working on something. Waone kama wataraise hiyo pressure yake.
Okay.
Lakini hawakutueleza vizuri shida ni nini, ikaenda hivyo, alafu baadaye tukapoteza mama yetu.
Okay.
Sasa sijajua kama hiyo low pressure kila alikuwa amesema.
Okay.
Huwa wanafanya nini alafu wainue hiyo pressure yake kuja juu kidogo.
Alright, sawa.
Asante.
So asante sana Jeremy kutoka Eldoret. Salimia sana watu wa Eldoret and pole sana. That's a whole other daktari, that's a whole other twist to this conversation. And recordable readings. Does that oftenly happen?
Yeah, it does happen. Actually, first thing maybe nasema pole sana kwa kupoteza mama yako. Lakini pia kuna kitu amenikumbusha yenye tulikuwa tumejatackle. We talked about the issue of history na which readings yenye watazamaji watajua ni 150 ama ni gani. Yeah, so we talked just about the normal, the high normal and the pre-hypertension. So there's stage 1 hypertension and there's stage 2. So stage 1 hypertension is 140 to 160, 90 to 99. And then we have now 160 to 180, which is stage 2. And then we have 160 to 180, and then 100 to maybe 119.
All right.
So that is stage 2. And then now stage 3 is above 180.
Okay.
And then above 120.
Okay.
So that's really bad. So normally, we understand stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Now it has an implication on which medication and all that. But normally, when you start talking about stage 2 and stage 3, you are likely now to get, especially now stage 3, you are likely now to get complication of hypertension like stroke, heart failure, and kidney failure. So I think maybe now the watazamaji wanafaa understand your part sana.
Yeah.
If it goes above 180, 120, you are at any time you are at very high risk of maybe getting stroke, especially kama uko na family member akona stroke na vitu kama hizo. Yeah, and then now for this one, maybe sasa kumari to your swali is that normally now when it goes very high, it can become unrecordable, but also when it goes very low, it can also become unrecordable. So kukua unrecordable inamaanisha inaweza kuwa chini sana ama ikuwe juu sana. Na kukua chini inamaanisha kama ni less than 90 and 60. So na hiyo mostly ikikuwa chini inamaanisha maybe mostly for patients who have been taking antihypertensives, ama patients wa diabetic inamaanisha maybe kama ni patient wa diabetic amepata kuna hiyo shida inaitwa ya diabetes complication yenye sasa unapoteza maji mengi kwa mwili.
Okay.
Na una sweat sana na vitu kama hizo. Inafanyanga unapoteza maji na kupoteza una pressure zako zinarudi chini.
Right.
Ama umemeza dawa za pressure, umemeza mingi ama ulirukisha ama kuna vile kufuatanisha na sasa ikapata pressure ikiwa mahali fulani na ikaishukisha chini kabisa. So what we do for that normally we try to give fluids. Tunapeana nini kuna kitu inaitwa normal saline.
Right.
Ama ringas lactate tunawapea at least inawapandisha.
Right.
Kama iko juu sana we try to give some drugs. There are those drugs zenye tunatumianga zile rescue drugs sasa za kujaribu kurudisha chini dawa.
Right. Let's pick this call from Thika. Ryan, habari asubuhi?
Nzuri sana.
I hope watu wa Thika mko salama?
Tuko salama huku.
Yes, pia huku tuko salama. Uko na swali au maoni?
Mimi niko na swali.
Yes, uliza.
Swali yangu ni the issue concerning weight. I'm a rugby player.
Okay.
So unapata playing rugby inahitaji like the position which you play that you wear with a lot of weight. So according to me, I'm also short. But
Okay.
So, is it healthy or?
So do you regularly do physical activities? How is your lifestyle? Ryan,
Yeah.
yeah?
Yeah, I do physical activities.
Okay, so wacha daktari atatuambia tu sahi. Thank you very much, Ryan, kutoka where you calling us from? Yes, Thika. 95, I can really see our time is really up, even as you answer him, and also the whole bit of, is this a rich man's condition at this age? The whole dynamics are changing. He's 95 kgs, nasema he's short. Does he need to worry? Is it dangerous?
Yeah, okay, yes, I think swali yake sikupata vizuri sana, lakini nimepick something about the issue na weight na kama iko sawa ama kitu kama hiyo.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just something I can say, maybe as a passing remark, or maybe just to give a general statement about lifestyle modification. Tukisema mambo na physical activities, especially for heart diseases ama for hypertension, tunasema at least you should be able to do at least 30 minutes of moderate intense exercise. Na hiyo inamaanisha maybe kujog ama kutembea kwa haraka, at least should be 30 minutes per day.
Okay.
At least 5 to 7 days per week. So that is the recommendation by WHO.
Okay.
Yes. So anything less than that, then maybe haujafanya umefanya less.
Right.
Ama anything more than that, maybe you're just going beyond. And then there's these things called about diet pia unafaa angalie. Tumeongelea mambo na vegetable, it's called DASH diet. Yeah. So mambo na vegetable, fruits, na pia una make sure you use low sodium. Alafu if it's fats, you make sure it's unsaturated fats mostly. Hizi omega-3 and omega-6.
So
yes.
Right. And I believe even as we continue, we'll probably have this conversation. We're marking World Hypertension Day on Friday. What do you expect, even as to also answer to what is this a rich man's condition? As your last remarks, and what do you expect on Friday from the government, from NGOs? What will be said?
Okay. Yeah, so just quickly to jump in terms of the epidemiology, it's usually something that is a bit tricky kwa sababu unapata kwamba some of the data that will be taken from a certain group of community, maybe which have a certain exposure. So apart from the issue of having maybe a low income, maybe wako na certain exposure, they're exposed to some form of diet, or they are exposed to some form of genetics, which is modifying their risk factor for hypertension.
Okay.
And then now someone will pick it as low income.
Right.
So low income and high income doesn't really come to, because now when you look at the general criteria, which has been done a large study, large trial, inaonyesha kwamba low income, they're likely to get more hypertension.
It's neither here nor there.
It's not there nor there.
Okay, so.
Yes.
Right.
Then maybe parting remarks is that for hypertension, let's make sure we do screening. Because when you look at Kenyans, screening rate is very low.
Okay.
At least studies shows that at least 56% of the population they have never screened, and maybe from that, people who have been screened, there are so many people who are also not aware that they have hypertension.
Right.
So let's increase the awareness. Let's go for screening. Let's measure the pressures, and let's follow those guidelines.
Right.
Yes.
Fantastic. Dr. Stephen Obiero, Nabongo Medical Officer. Asante sana for all the wise words. In case you have more questions, you could probably leave a number, so that I'm pretty sure there are so many callers who really wanted to jump in, or people who have a number of questions. We could probably talk to you directly, or any social media handle that you could provide, so that they throw in all those questions for you.
Yes. So for the number, maybe I can give the number, 0728 447 847. Twitter, they can go to Western Medical Society at X, then they'll get the information.
So there you have it. As we discuss matters, World Hypertension Day, this coming Friday, Dr. says, do really more of screening. I'm pretty sure by all this, until Friday, today's Monday, all the way until Friday, there are going to be a number of centers, medical centers around where you are, just offering free screening. So WHO says you can't really know the symptoms until you go and get screened. So till then, we'll be giving you more of these conversations right here at TV47. It's 9 a.m. It's a Monday, time to get into matters first aid. We'll take a short break. Stick around to know what to expect.